one of the tactics that this matrix uses to mask truth, right? One of the major tactics this matrix uses to mask the truth, or to weave half lies, is to make stuff sound smart by it being, counterintuitive. And I've noticed this a lot, where basically the people who are like the midwits, right, the middle of the bell curve. One of the things that they try to do to sort of sound smart, and one of the ways that the system uses, well, one of the ways the system uses, uh, the count that like it uses counterintuitive sort of thinking in order to make something sound like it's a true statement, and in order to make it sound true even though it's not. It's one of the ways to sort of wrap up lies to make it sound smart, to make it sound true. And it's one of the ways that that like dumb people sound smart, by being basically counter the obvious thing, right? And it's one of those things where you have to be super alert whenever someone presents to you like stuff that's like super, it's like counterintuitive, because it sounds super smart to say that, like it's like you have like two circles, right? And like one of one of them's obviously bigger than the other one, right? I've heard that analogy used, right? But it's like, oh, which circle is bigger, right? But then they say, oh, but did you know that this small circle actually has 300% more area, right? Like they'll use that kind of thinking in order to get people onto the wrong path, right? They'll use, this is where gut feeling comes in, right? This is how you counter this, is using gut feeling, because you obviously, like in your soul, you obviously know, very obvious stuff. Like some stuff is obvious for a reason, right? And some stuff, it's almost like if you look at like all of like the bell curve memes, right? You have like the stupid people believing something, and then you have like the midwits believing the opposite, but then you have like the super smart people believing what the same thing that the stupid people believe, right? Like the people who are at the edges of the bell curve, because what it is, right? What it is that it is either you're too stupid to let intellect get in the way of the other stuff, right? It's either you're so stupid that intellect doesn't get in the way of like your gut feeling, or your wisdom, your intuition, right? So it's either you're too dumb to let intellect get in the way, or you're smart enough to realize that being smart doesn't matter, right? And so that's one of the things that you have to be aware of, is that some stuff is obvious for a reason, and this matrix uses counterintuitive thinking, and it uses like the whole counter the obvious thing in order to sound smart, right? Like because it sounds very smart to be a contrarian, right? And one of the examples of this is how the New Age will use basically like if you look at like the evil in the world, right? Like we look at this world, that it's very evil, and it's very obvious that this world is evil. It's very obvious that that evil should not exist, right? But then what the New Agers will do is they'll present this sort of counterintuitive argument that, oh, but Earth is actually a school, right? And it sounds super smart, it sounds super sexy because of the fact that it's counterintuitive, right? And like all the counterintuitive stuff, it sort of dazzles you with like the counterintuitive sort of optical illusion stuff, to distract you from how dog shit the argument actually is, right? Like, oh, we're here to learn lessons. Like, how the fuck are we here to learn lessons if you get memory wiped every time? And like, how is this helping to grow our souls? And in fact, I mean, this place helps, actually hurts your soul. It does the opposite. It regresses your soul. Like the more times you're recycled back here in the reincarnation process. But this is one of the things that I've noticed, is that this matrix will sort of package things to be sort of counterintuitive. It'll teach you that good is evil and that evil is good. It'll teach you that white is black and black is white. It'll invert everything. And one of the ways that it does this, in order to one of the ways that it convinces people to believe the inversion, is to package it in a sort of counterintuitive way that sounds super smart. It sounds super sexy to hear it. It makes you sound smart when you say it to other people, but there's a reason why certain stuff is obvious. It's like the whole like being like whole counter the obvious thing, being whole counter like it's like people who say that like, oh, we're here to learn lessons, and then like, oh, like the bad stuff that happens, it's actually really good, and there's actual karma in this way. It's almost like, oh, but it's like the most obvious sort of simple answer is that this world is fundamentally evil. There's a metaphysical evil that runs this world. That's the most obvious answer. No mental gymnastics. But you look at all of the mental gymnastics that like the New Agers use, and also the Abrahamic religions, the mental gymnastics they use to justify the suffering of this world is just absolutely insane. And it's all very counterintuitive, and it all sounds very smart and very nice because it's cope, right? And the thing is that you have to have a sort of Occam's razor sort of mentality whenever you think about this stuff. Is that yet again, some stuff is obvious for a reason, right? Even though there might be like the whole like counterintuitive, stuff, right? That they try to present to you, like the simplest explanation is most likely the right explanation. I'm not saying it always is, right? But the simplest explanation is more often than not the right explanation. Like, why is there so much evil in this world? This world is evil, right? That's the simplest explanation. No mental gymnastics. No, oh, but we're here to learn lessons. No, no, oh, but like, it's our fault because we ate an apple in the Garden of Eden. And none of that mental gymnastics crap of like, oh, why does evil exist in the world? Well, it was made by a loving God, but actually, this happened and this happened, and it's actually our fault because of this, and that, and that's why the world sucks, right? It's never the world sucks because it sucks for a reason, because it is designed that way. Nobody ever says that. Everyone always introduces the mental gymnastics. Everyone introduces the whole counterintuitive stuff because it sounds smart, it sounds all very cool, but it prevents. But what that sort of thinking does, the whole being counterintuitive, counter the obvious thing, what that does is it prevents people from seeing the obvious truth. Truth and complexity are not the same thing. In fact, truth is more often than not is simple. There's simplicity in truth, right? Usually, whenever people discover like scientific discoveries, for example, right? Usually, what happens is it's usually something so simple that people overlooked it and tried to create complicated theories like fucking string theory, right? Like it's like stuff like that where you have. And I feel like this is also like that whole counterintuitive stuff, but like being counter the very. It's almost like there's this thing where it's like your gut feeling and your soul pretty much tells you that like, there's like this obvious thing that exists, but then you have the whole counterintuitive sort of almost academic way of thinking where people try to people confuse complexity and truth. That like it's almost like if it's not complicated, then it must not be true, is what people say. But I'm here to tell you that yet again, the most simple explanation is most likely the right explanation, right? The most simple explanation, the most succinct explanation, the explanation for things that has less moving parts is most obviously the right. It is most likely the right one. But what people do is people get caught up in this sort of counterintuitive thinking where what they do is they get stuck. And this is one of the other ways that the Matrix tricks you is you get stuck in a maze of complexity. You try to overcomplicate things, right? If you look at like the modern day like metaphysical like the people who like try to study like metaphysical stuff, like they get caught up in like all crystals and chakras and kundalini and yoga and mudras and like holding hand signs and like this and that and the other, and you have to do this, and the power of 3, 6, and 9 and the golden ratio and all that. They get caught in a maze of complexity that it's like most of it is random bullshit that distracts you from the stuff that really matters. It distracts you from the stuff. It distracts you from the very simple stuff that's the most important stuff, right? And it's like the battle between good versus evil. It's the existence of good versus evil, like the fact that this world is run by a metaphysical evil, right? All of that stuff is sort of drowned out by basically mostly noise, like the whole like aliens, UFOs, golden ratio, Nikola Tesla, 3, 6, and 9, sacred geometry, crystals from Etsy crap, right? All of that complexity, and all of like the whole, oh, we're here to learn lessons, and we're here, and it's like oh, but this evil is teaching us something, right? Like all of your kids, like all of your children being kidnapped to be sacrificed to Moloch in this underground base. Oh, there's a purpose to it, guys. Don't worry. Right, all of that counterintuitive stuff and all that unnecessary complexity, right? Like these authors of confusion in these new age circles and in these religious circles, right? These are authors of confusion they're introducing mostly noise, but and this is something that the new age has sort of mastered the ability to do, is to talk about a lot of things without talking about anything at all. Like the amount of buzzwords that you hear in like a single sentence is absolutely insane with these new agers. And And that's by design. Is that this matrix will introduce complexity. That's another a sort of trick that this matrix will use against you is to try to dazzle you with complexity, but to also dazzle you with the counterintuitive stuff, right? Because counterintuitive stuff sounds smart, but yet again, like some stuff is obvious for a reason, and like the most obvious answer is probably the most correct answer, right? The existence of good versus evil, the existence of consciousness as sort of the prime element, all of that stuff is linked together to create a very clear picture of what reality actually is. But what they do is they dazzle you with the complexity of all the chakra kundalini, crystals, sacred geometry crap, right? And they dazzle you with all this stuff to distract you, and then they also introduce the whole counterintuitive stuff so that you believe the inversion, right? That's the key tactic here, by using the whole counterintuitive sort of thinking to make it sound smart, right? But it sounds smart, but it's not wise. Wisdom is simple, right? But what they do is they utilize the whole counterintuitive stuff to make you believe the opposite of what's true. To make you believe, because you have, in the same way that we have a sense of good and evil, in the same way that you have a sense of good and evil, you also have a sense of right and wrong, right? When I say right and wrong, you can tell when something's right or something's wrong, from a truth perspective, not just from good and evil, but you have a sense of right and wrong. You can tell when stuff is right and wrong, and it's very subtle, right? And your subconscious mind sort of blurts it out, and it's very obvious and it's very self-evident, right? The whole oh, we're reincarnating to learn lessons. It's very obviously BS, but people believe it because they try to justify the suffering of this world. They try to justify the suffering of this world. They try to justify it, and it sounds all well and good because it's counterintuitive, because it sounds smart, right? And so that's what I wanted to sort of talk about in this video. So just sort of mention that's one of the tools that this matrix will use to get you to believe in the inversion. Is they'll hook you with the whole counterintuitive stuff. Like even the word counterintuitive, right? The opposite of your intuition, counter your intuition. Right. So what they do is they get you to believe the opposite of your own intuition. Does that sound good to you? No, it sounds like deception, right? Counterintuitive, right? Look at the etymology, look at the wordplay that they're using, right? It's counter your intuition, right? It's counter the obvious thing, the obviously true thing. And that's what they're using to get millions of people in these new age religions and in these like mainstream Abrahamic religions. They're getting these people to believe like the opposite. They're getting these people to believe the opposite of their own intuition, their own gut feeling. They're getting these people to believe in the inversion, right? Believing the opposite of what's true by using the whole counterintuitive sort of stuff. They're packaging it that way so that it sounds sexy, it sounds smart, right? And on top of that, one of the things that they will also do is they'll dazzle you with the whole complexity of like, let's talk about crystals and light energy and sacred geometry and the chakra kundalinis and the magical mystical energies of the Pleiadian. Like they'll introduce all this complexity and they'll hit you with all these buzzwords in order to dazzle you. Like, oh well, this guy's really smart because he's using all these having all these complex topics, and all this other stuff, right? But that's one of the vehicles of deception in this matrix is that they will use counterintuitive stuff, and they will use complexity to sort of dazzle you into believing lies. Okay, so and you have to be very careful with counterintuitive stuff because yet again, your gut feeling, your intuition, you have to go with your gut feeling, intuition, every single time, right? And even the word counterintuitive should be a red flag, right? Even the word counterintuitive, it's counter, opposite, against your intuition, intuitive, right? Anything that works against your intuition, you should be very, very, very skeptical of. You should have your antennae extra propped up. You should have your head on a swivel whenever anyone mentions the whole counterintuitive stuff. Whenever anyone packages something in a very counterintuitive way, you have to be very, very extra on alert, because counterintuitive stuff, it's designed to be a lie. It's designed to trick you into believing the inversion that is this reality, right? Because yet again, it's counterintuitive, counter your intuition. You just look at the word; it's very obvious what they're trying to do with the way that they're trying to package information. Right. But yeah, that's the video.